person in the space to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems. But all these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal, $10 million or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? To what they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, well, there was fungibility between wallets. Money to a politician on my behalf. You're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable balances. But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like, I forgot. It's so silly. Is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. He's like, well, think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store executives, Ryan Salami or something, I think that's his last name, Salami, I don't know, I just don't know how to pronounce it, but he was like, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam. Sam, what are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like, they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no, you can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like, you put it's left, and ultimately because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims. Basically, they didn't have the money. The son of Harvard lawyers, we just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he was I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos. You can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
But you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cat. He thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, and basically like, shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch. Sam goes, oh, you won like our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers? This thing. So all this money's going in, and then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time at the end, when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam,
I watched the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him trying
That's John Ray.
Yeah. Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing.
Never understood how Bernie Madoff got people, because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I noticed with all of these things, the thread is on sticks or something. Like, it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. That's what ultimately matters, is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out? And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into it of what's was going on. Now he's still like trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big like kind of scam.
I don't really understand what's going, like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one, because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all,
they're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just like,
analogy for losing your house.
You know what's funny? Yeah.
You know, I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say I saw all this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff, and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video, just lied my way into it. I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff. To like, if you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. You can know their assets. So it's like a big thing recently in crypto. They'll say, hey, we're going to show you proof of reserves. What does that mean? They mean we'll show you on chain all our or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house like reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in a stew. They bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names, and also hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that you do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild. I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
was Coinbase. It seems like they're, legitimate, but so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like that. Her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this, found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your success.
Easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot. After the fact, he's like, still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
Right, people in charge who are going to take the fall, you resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated. To store your money somewhere else. How do you store it? So there's this idea of like these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that like, hey, if you're someone like me or you were a grandma who just put one Bitcoin on there, or, more likely the grandson, he treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was.
It wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to like be that successful that you're just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking.
Was a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that?
These exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices. And then after he made his money that way, he launched where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want. And you don't have to your name has to appear nowhere. And so this is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, like, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you
what is it's a crypto exchange, right? So how does that work?
So The first question is when you learn about crypto.
Down because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
Yeah. So before, it's like if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to all, so
we don't need that.
The famous example is like Coinbase is in America, and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're publicly traded. There's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, oh. So by the third interview, I'd studied him, and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to it was the terms of give that you this yield. He starts explaining like this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And so ultimately, Matt Levine's like, yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But again, it stops short. You have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange. So he decides to donate dark to a Republican, like to Republicans. And part of the accusation is he knowingly did this through one of his, I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with like hucksters and fraud where, when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer. All the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. There were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted. And why is so much of your balance sheet made up of your own tokens? It's a big question. So one of the things that FTX had done, and a lot of companies were doing at the time, of that token, then you sell it off, and then the price plummets, so you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. Like there's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. Friedberg, shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that.
What was his? I remember, but what was his?
There was already all this worry in the past. That summer, there had been a bunch of companies that collapsed, and people had never thought FTX. It was kind of the first time anyone thought FTX could maybe not have the money. You can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this, and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader, right? It's all at some address. And so people were asking, like, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum? What is the experience of the lawyer that FTX then hires is like being complicit on a leaked private call, trying to cover up this God mode scam.
And then when you have them on, there's a lot of, I wasn't aware, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that, I don't know. There was all this hemming and...
They're setting it up with like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke, right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to be really effective. It's like crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else, but a lot of money. Like, well, how can you view this as a battle? Like, but he viewed it as like we're sparring partners. Like, and you won this round or you won the war.
Because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
Now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange. He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and you think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back. Company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. I, too, am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I can put my money
So is the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin.
You believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like...
and sell off all his tokens. Would they be still solvent today or still in operation today? Would they not crash, or was this an...
So if you default on that loan, I'm out $1 million. Another way is I ask for, okay, I'll take some equity in the studio if something goes wrong, right? So I cover my butt if you default on it. Now, there's some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing interviews.
And that video has aged so well because it's like people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud. Like Mark Cohodes, he's a famous short seller. He was what that was to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our balance. Very strange. And these offshore entities were also using like U.S. branches. Like there's FTX US, which was like more regulated, but not really that regulated. We're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically like they call them straw donors, because it's like, if I give money to you to give some reactions, but not much. What I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like I was just like, there was something different about the reaction to it. Like, and Victim wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have I'm this guy who's going to maximize good in the world, and that was his reason for working all the time. I mean, that's the justification to be hopped up on amphetamines. It's like maximize productivity, maximize human happiness, TT. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. Looks like they have $10 billion, but like 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here. But the problem is that that's the issue was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who like pushed over the House, made this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. It's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by C, and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And, I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. Like, actually, campaign finance laws, I've heard, are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in, like, the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate, pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on
your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just like, he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, like, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's like even more cynical than just buying one party assets. You can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right. People that were standing out and saying none of this makes sense.
Right.
And who were those people?
So there were a few people. There was outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of the
party.
That's right. But
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So Sam knew publicly, in our current American climate, like, handle now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep
and probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was to put like let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into appreciate your transparency, kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that everything, I don't have access to the book. Like, I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda.
One guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their... I went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was like, I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any. It's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto, because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem, touch your money. Obviously, that was the whole point. It's like, you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. Like it's almost like a bank. Like you deposit with a bank. Your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money, Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of 2 Harvard lawyers.
Regulators. When he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like, what could they have possibly done to make it easy?
And she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't going to fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery. The money system has to be safe. Like, your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like, or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to...
Views about what? Like, you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies. And they've recently been shut down. But the idea was...
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better...
They kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, like, we think they're insolvent. Because we had taken a look at their numbers, and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the token. The problem is, when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral. So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange. And the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. But I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is, a lot of people had located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your...
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college, and all my friends get an MLMs, multi-level marketing, sort of like, just like the, like, hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these, like, get-rich seminars. Actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame, like, onto Alameda and, like, I don't control Alameda, I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore from the arms of one huckster to another. Like, it's just like almost to something worse. There said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws. They never ended up doing that. Not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became an of you're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? Calling that a fraud early. I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud, which thankfully she did, and she's fine now. She takes medication to replace the hormones her thyroid would generate. But I saw my mom kind of get swept in this thing that I knew was nonsense. But a lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the most fair case you could make about lateral dollars or some asset will give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin, and that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value.
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16, basically screaming about all these scammers online, and unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, it had gotten, his whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet, and he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called, because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want, I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was I'm this effective altruist. Lack of regulation and the ability to send peer to peer, which means you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams with regulators. They were all Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed. And CZ felt like he was cut out. So that stirred up this battle between them. And ultimately,
initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone.
And